A tale that turns terrifyingly true is encountered by three friends who spend the night sharing terrible stories in the scary story house on fire. Let me share with you the moment when my life was permanently altered. The evening I feared I would pass away. The night I went insane. I was 13 years old, and it was a lovely spring night. I was left alone at home during the weekend while my folks were away on vacation. David and Arnold, my two closest buddies, came over to visit me. We were huddled together in my bedroom jamming out. Arnold decreased the volume with a hand gesture. "Hey, how about we tell some terrifying tales?" he said. "I want to be scared," someone said. "Sounds like a smart plan," David thought. "Who will take the lead? I have one." I agreed to help, but I'm not sure whether I should say it. "I'm afraid," David said. "Come on." "I want to hear it." "Okay," I said. I once heard a really horrible story. Everything took place many years ago. There was a dad whose son was 7 years old. He had lost his wife during the boy's delivery. They had no neighbors for miles since they lived out in the country. Since the phone lines weren't too long at the time, they were even without a phone. The father was startled to see that his house was on fire when he returned from work one day. As soon as he had the notion, he hurried inside while yelling the name of his small kid. He understood the poor youngster was stranded in his bedroom when he heard his son respond. Father dashed to the door and attempted to open it, but it refused to budge. The door was blocked by a beam that had fallen from the bedroom ceiling. He knocked on the door with all his strength, but it was too solid. He even rushed against it with his shoulder in an attempt to break it down, but it was futile. He could hear his son wailing all the time. The youngster was terrified, screaming and pleading for aid. The man continued to pound on the door, but it remained impenetrable. He yelled angrily. He wept in despair. He couldn't think of anything else except the door and his son wailing on the other side. In the house, his kid was burnt to death. The father also died. He never opened the door, and he stayed there to the end, feverishly attempting to smash it down until he succumbed to the smoke and fire. Arnold scolded at me and remarked, "That's not scary." "I have to admit, it's pretty weak," David concurred. "It's more sad than scary." That's when I decided to finish the narrative for them. I hadn't intended to tell them that portion, but I got carried away in my attempt to impress them. It was so dumb to keep going. I should not have told them that. "Wait, you don't know the rest of the story?" I said. "The father's ghost has been trying to open the door and save his son ever since. And if you say, I'd rather not speak the precise words. However, if you call him and tell him that everything is on fire and request that he come and save you, his spirit will appear at your door and carry you away." David gave me a thoughtful gaze. "Have you ever tried it?" he inquired. "No," I said. "I'd be too scared to test it out." Arnold's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "Hey," he responded, "we ought to do it now." I stiffened. I was already sorry for mentioning the legend, and I had no wish to call a ghost. David grins. "Yeah, why not?" he said. They didn't give me the opportunity to tell them that I didn't want to do it, but I was going to. Arnold mimicked the young kid by yelling, "Daddy," in a shaky voice. "Daddy, aid me." All around me are flames. I'm terrified. He started giggling at that point. I refrained from grinning, but he chuckled. David amusedly observed him while remaining silent. Arnold screamed once more, but this time louder. "Daddy, I'm burning. I'm on fire. Help." "Arnold, quit it. It's not amusing," I yelled. I didn't mean to joke. It just sorta came out that way. I wanted to stop hearing him because I was so terrified. The question, "What are you afraid of?" Arnold guffawed. "Come on now. It's just a ridiculous tale." "That's it. Certainly not a good one." Smirking, he continued, "Daddy, please assist me. I'm being burned alive by the fire. A sudden loud knock on my bedroom door woke me up. Arnold's cry was interrupted. We all went cold. An unsettling hush descended. We all exchanged glances. We all remained silent. Boom, boom. We nearly leaped out of our skins. Boom, boom, boom. "What's that noise?" Arnold yelled. "If this is a joke, it's really not funny," David commented. His skin was as white as a sheet. The pounding on the door persisted. We then heard a man scream. Those horrifying howls will live on in my memory. They are still audible to me. It sounded like a dying animal's scream. It was inhumane and heartbreaking. The hammering on the door and the horrifying shriek continued unabated. I attempted to hide behind the wardrobe because I was afraid. Arnold took a seat and prepared to hit anyone who entered the room. David was huddled against the wall, tears flowing down his cheeks. "No, no," he exclaimed. "What exactly is this?" "I'm terrified." Immediately, the screams outside the door became louder, more distressing and more horrifying. The pounding on the door became more intense. I was afraid it would fall off its hinges. Then David appeared to succumb to panic. "I can't take it anymore," he lamented. "I've got to get out of here," as he dashed to the window and flung open the door. "No," I screamed. "Don't." He jumped out the window before I could complete my statement. I could hear him fall. Everything fell silent for a little moment, then I heard him scream in agony. I fell. I'm in jail. My return. I'm in jail." I dashed to the window and peered out. David screamed in agony on the pavement floor. The screaming from behind the door became increasingly louder and more maniacal. The banging became more intense. I was going insane. It was all a nightmare, and David's screams simply increased to the dread of the scenario, especially because Arnold and I were too afraid to leave the room to assist him. Then I noticed a scent. I hadn't noticed it at first, but the air in the room was now foul-smelling. It was oppressive. The odor of charred flesh. It was excruciating. When I looked away from the window, I noticed Arnold standing still in the center of the room. He had wide eyes and was looking at the entrance as if in a trance. Then he knelt and puked on the carpet. The thumping, yelling, shouting, odor of burning flesh, and Arnold spitting were all too much for me. I, too, began to vomit. As David howled outside and the frenzied hammering on the door continued, I slumped back against the wall. Then I had a thought. Perhaps David's shouts outside attracted the guy outside the door. I shut the window. We sat on the floor, hands over our ears, quivering in horror as the catastrophic smashes on the door went unabated. The horrifying howls penetrated our eardrums, and the burning stink combined with the scent of our vomit. The shouts faded, the scent faded, and the beating on the door got less and weaker until all was silence. Through the locked glass, all we could hear were David's muted moans of anguish. Arnold glanced at me and asked quietly, "What do we do now?" "Maybe we should call the police." That's what I said. "Or call the fire department, or, I'm not sure, David needs an ambulance. Downstairs, do you think it's gone?" "Well, it's quiet," I responded cautiously. "That's correct," he said. "We'll have to descend, so I'll go. Anyway, it's gone, isn't it?" "I guess so," I replied. Arnold rose slowly and stepped hesitantly to the door. He cautiously grasped the door handle, pushed it open, and peered into the corridor. It was deserted. Then, with a smirk on his face, he turned to face me and remarked, "It's crazy, the door was always open. This idiotic ghost." He didn't have time to finish his sentence, though. A hand flashed around the door and grabbed Arnold around the neck. He stood there terrified, not yelling, his eyes wide with horror. The arm had been blackened and burned. I could smell the charred meat. Before I could react, Arnold vanished right in before of my eyes, yanked through the threshold and whisked down the corridor at an inconceivable speed. With a thunderous clang, the door slammed shut. I sprang up and dashed to the door, but I didn't dare to open it. I yelled Arnold's name many times more, but there was no answer. I couldn't force myself to open the door any longer. I was concerned that the burnt figure was still around. Arnold was never seen again after that night. My parents took me to see a therapist. I never told her or anyone else anything. No one, not even my parents. They would never have believed me in the first place. David followed suit. He was in the hospital for a month. He fell and shattered his back. Even today, I am terrified of opening doors. I'm afraid of what I'll find on the other side. Years had gone since that horrible night in the scary story house on fire, and the narrator's recollections had become foggy. They'd moved on, creating a life they thought was safe and secure. While driving home from work one evening, the narrator observed something strange about their front door. A faint, evil murmur pricked their ear, a voice they thought they had forgotten. They approached the door with caution. Their hearts hammering, they unlocked the door with shaky hands, exposing an empty corridor bathed in strange, gloomy light. They entered, their fear growing with each passing second. The house was quiet. Too quiet. It felt as though the very air was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. As they ventured deeper into the house, the shadows seemed to grow darker and more malevolent. The whispering continued, growing louder and more insistent, like a cacophony of tormented souls. It spoke their name, over and over, a chilling refrain that echoed through the halls. Panicking, the narrator rushed back to the front door, only to find it sealed shut. It wouldn't budge, no matter how hard they tried. Desperation set in as they realized that they were trapped, alone in a house that had become a nightmarish prison. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the house into darkness. The whispering voices grew more menacing, closing in from all sides. A frigid wind swept through the hallway, extinguishing the narrator's hope and replacing it with an overwhelming, suffocating terror. In that moment, they knew that they were not alone in the scary story house on fire. Whatever had been awakened that night so long ago had returned, and it hungered for their fear, their despair, their very soul. The narrator's screams joined the chorus of torment, echoing through the house as they were consumed by the darkness, their fate sealed in a never-ending nightmare, a horrifying ending from which there was no escape. In the depths of their never-ending nightmare, the narrator found themselves in a nightmarish labyrinth of shifting walls and corridors. The whispering voices became a cacophony of anguished screams and eerie laughter that echoed endlessly. It was a realm where reality twisted and distorted, and time lost all meaning. As they stumbled through the endless maze, the walls seemed to close in, squeezing the air out of their lungs. Shadows danced and contorted, taking on grotesque forms that reached out to grab them. Each step they took led them further into the heart of their own personal hell. The temperature plummeted, and a bone-chilling cold seeped into their very soul. They could feel unseen eyes watching, malevolent forces lurking in the darkness. It was a place where the laws of physics and reason had no hold, where nightmares took on a tangible form. In their desperate attempts to escape, the narrator encountered fleeting glimpses of their past, distorted and nightmarish. They saw the faces of loved ones twisted into grotesque masks of horror, and they heard the agonized cries of those who had suffered because of their actions. Time became a ceaseless loop, and the narrator could no longer distinguish between past, present, and future. They were trapped in a perpetual state of terror, reliving their worst fears and regrets over and over again. And then, just when they thought they could take no more, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a grotesque, nightmarish version of themselves, distorted and twisted by the malevolent forces that inhabited the house. The doppelganger whispered, "You can never escape, this is your eternity."